What's up guys and welcome back. Today in this video we're going to be discussing Castle Rock episode 6 titled Filter. So wow, we have a lot to discuss in this episode. This went really sci-fi, really heavy sci-fi, and there's a lot to chew on. So the episode starts off with a scene of Henry's dad's funeral, which is kind of weirdly intermixed with Nick trying on his dad's suit and going through his things, and we find these little like sermon tapes from 1986. Then we go to the 80s when we find the huge video camera which he's been filming these tapes that we still don't really know what's on them. We get a glimpse at the beginning of the episode when Nick plays one of the tapes and we see Henry's father taking Henry through the woods, and it just looks really weird and like conspicuous. He's following. Henry doesn't really like that he's there. He keeps looking back at the camera. But we'll get into that further in the video. So back at the funeral we get the two guys that were at Alan's meeting. I think it's Rory Culkin, it's definitely one of the Culkin brothers, and this other dude in a trench coat, and they're at the funeral as well, so they obviously have some kind of connection with Henry and his father. And if you're going to be like creeping around in the background at funeral, trying not to be seen, probably best if you don't turn up in the biggest RV in the world. These guys are like the cheap rate Castle Rock version of Walter White in Jesse Pinkman. So with the aftermath of the wood scene with Alan and Nick at the end of last episode, Nick tells Alan that he wants him to go to this junkyard which is miles away to retrieve something that's going to help him fix up Ruth. But we don't really know what it is at this point. We figure out a bit later in the episode that Alan has actually gone to this junkyard. There's all these like rusty ass cars everywhere, and my first thought was we're definitely going to see like a little glimpse of like Christine or a vehicle from one of Stephen King's books, but we didn't, unless it did and I didn't see it. And the reason he's there is that he's there to collect Lacey, the warden's car. I'm not sure what's in the car, or if it's just he wants the car for some certain reason. So while Nick is just like walking around the grounds of the Diva residence, we get this shot of this black and white security camera footage that Diva's put up of Nick just walking into the house or around the house, and he's wearing this really oversized suit, and it just reminded me of like Night of the Living Dead. I don't know why, because it's black and white and just this old style suit of the guy walking around, and the house kind of does look like a farmhouse, I guess. Nick sits down and he looks in front of the mirror, and this kind of like got rid of the theory that he's some sort of vampire, because we got basically got a couple of minutes of him just sitting there looking at himself in his suit in the mirror. So yeah, he's not a vampire, unless Salem's Lot of vampires aren't affected by mirrors. I can't remember. So Ruth is back home now, and she seems to be having a bit of a trouble mentally, and she goes to find the box of chess pieces. Now I think this is what Henry had in the first episode. It's like a soap sort of statue of a chess piece. So she has the actual chess pieces, and she kind of holds on to it like a memory, and I think what it is that these chess pieces are like her constant to the real world. With her having dementia, these are like the one things that anchor her to memories, and I'll get more into that later because I think I've got quite a good theory about what's going on there. We get a surprise arrival in Castle Rock, and that is Henry's son Wendell, and pretty much their entirety of their scenes, there is Henry, Wendell, and a third character, his mobile phone. He is just addicted to his mobile phone, and this is something that is obviously happening all the time now. So yeah, I felt a bit of Henry's pain when he was just looking at his son like in dismay while he was just ignoring him on his phone playing some game. Also noted that I think the actor who plays Henry's son Wendell is actually the kid who plays Mike in the 2017 version of It. So we have two characters from It now in Castle Rock, which is a pretty cool little nod, I guess. One of the creepiest shots of the episode is when Strand is in her house and she's on the phone and she looks out the window, and even I didn't notice it for a second, but the bandaged priest guy was just standing at the window, and it's such like a creepy shot. And yeah, he looks just like Michael Myers does in Halloween Part 4 with the bandages around him, except for with that priest outfit he kind of looks like he's in a tux or something. It's really weird. But with only a few episodes, I don't know how that is actually going to play into the story. One of the big revelations in this episode is that Strand actually tells Henry that she killed his dad, but she did it through him, which is exactly what I said in my video for episode 1, 2 and 3. So if you go back and check out that video, you'll see some of my theories were actually like bang on in that for what's happened. I think I actually said those exact words that Strand said. So I saw a lot of people online saying maybe that they have sort of a quartet, which is the connection between a couple of people in the Dark Tower universe, or maybe they have like interlocked minds and spirits somehow, which is something that is relevant in a few Stephen King's books. I'm not sure if this is related to The Shine as well, if they both have The Shine. So Henry, Wendell and Ruth are in the house, and Ruth is in the kitchen looking out the window, and Nick is just standing there. Like, imagine this 6'3", 6'5" dude in her deceased husband's burial suit, just standing there looking through the window. You're bound to be pretty terrified at that point. And she actually says it. She says, "I'm pretty sure I buried him in that suit." So she recognises that. But what I thought was interesting is that she doesn't seem to really recognise Nick. I'm not sure if that's because of her mental issues or if it's just because she's never seen him before. So Henry goes out into the little second house where Nick is staying, and Nick is watching the tapes of Henry's dad, of him in the woods, and he's just looking very like shocked. He doesn't really want to be watching these, he doesn't want Nick to see them either. And their videos start out happy with them just like playing around, but then it goes to the scene where he is walking through the woods into the deep woods, and the way Matthew is speaking, it sounds like he's like trying to hypnotise him, trying to get him to listen to these sounds and just forget about everything that's going on. It sounds like he's trying to hypnotise him. So Henry's had enough of him just lurking around the house, and he decides that he's going to take him to Juniper Hill Asylum from It. Now I thought this scene would be a bit cooler than it was, but yeah, we get to see the asylum outside, and there's just like birds circling around the place, and one of them actually just kamikazes and crashes right in front of them. And the staff say that this has been happening for 2 weeks, so I don't even know if that's actually connected to Nick at all. Maybe there's another supernatural being in Juniper Hills. You know something bad's going to happen there. I wish we would have spent more time there, but it's heard over the radio when Alan is in the junkyard that there's a fire at Juniper Hills and some inmates have escaped, so possibly one of the people who have escaped may have this sort of power to just kill birds or whatever. So hopefully we get to see a bit more on that angle with the inmates escaping Juniper Hill. Wendell is talking to Henry about his adoption when he was younger and about the Divas and why they didn't have their own kid, and Henry actually comes out with saying that they were trying for a kid, and I think they said it died during childbirth. Now I think this is going to have some relevance to the story later on, and I'll get to that in my theory section towards the end. Now this is where the episode starts to get onto the fringe of sci-fi here. Wendell and Ruth are sitting in the house playing chess, and they start talking about the chess pieces. Ruth starts to come up with these weird conversations about time and how we've been here before, we've had this conversation before, and she just starts talking all of this sort of time travel jargon about being in and out of time. So possibly her dementia is not actually just a form of dementia, it's actually some kind of time bleed, or she's caught in between different time frames and she doesn't know where she is. And it's really interesting, and obviously there's going to be a lot more to do with that in the following episodes. So one of the coolest scenes visually in the episode is where Henry's taking this big ass camera out into the woods to try and follow his tracks from 27 years ago, and we get to see him looking through the camera at all of this woodland, which is reasonably kept and clean, and the signs are all fine. But then as he's looking up from the camera to think of where he actually is in the woods, we see all the decay from all the years that no one's been down there, so it's definitely a derelict place. So after Nick and his inmates or whatever have escaped from Juniper Hill, he decides to arrive back at home, and Ruth is in the house and she's dropped all the medication on the floor, and we see in the background that Nick just walked into the house in these boots, these fresh new boots. I'm assuming he's stolen from somewhere, and he just takes his shoes off and walked into the house. So in previous episodes we've seen that Ruth has told Henry to take his shoes off in the house, but obviously Nick wasn't there, so he kind of knows. So is he from a different time? Is he from a different reality? We'll get into that later. Now this is where we get into the sort of third final act of the episode, where things get super convoluted, super crazy, and Henry discovers a fire pit in the middle of the woods, and we find our trench coat wearing dude and Rory Culkin by the fire, and they seem like they go out there a lot, and we get into a really weird conversation, mostly by Rory Culkin's character, who weirdly reminds me of Emilio Estevez in this, just the way he talks. And the other character called Odin, I believe it is, it's Willie and Odin. The guy in the trench coat is Odin, and I believe, and he's deaf, so he can't speak, so Willie Culkin is doing all the talking for him, and he has got to be the best translator in the world, because some of this science jargon that he's talking, how can someone pick up on that translation, sign language, so fast? He deserves a 6-digit paycheck for that. So Odin reveals that him and Henry were good friends, and they used to always come out into the woods saying that this was their church. And I believe in the earlier episodes, Lacey's wife said that once he'd finished the church, he would go out into the woods as well. So they're definitely all connected, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see a flashback episode with all of those just talking and just doing whatever the hell they've been doing over these 27 years in Castle Rock. And they talk about the physics and spirituality, so this is where it gets into the science heavy stuff, and they bring up what's called a schism, which in this episode they talk, the schism is sort of a different world, different universes where the sound can just come from a different time or a different place. So they talk about hearing the voice of God, when what they're actually hearing is a different universe or a higher power, or from a different time, from the future or the past. So this changes things dramatically about what's actually happened, where Henry was, and just who the kid is. So it pretty much means that all of the choices that Lacey has made through this voice of God have come from somewhere that isn't a God. It's either someone from the future, the past, or a different reality who's been guiding him to do this. Odin mentioned something about like the ark and how they didn't build that in the story, but he's had his chance to build his own ark, and it turns out that this RV isn't completely pointless to the story. It's a completely soundproof room, a place where they can get rid of all the noise. So I'm assuming it's to do with like the people that shine, who can hear people's thoughts, and they say that this room is like a filter. It filters out all the noise, and all you can hear is the schism, the voices from the past, future, whatever. So obviously Henry isn't too interested in going in there, but they end up locking him in the room, and he has this weird ass trippy flashback, or flash forward, who knows what some of the images he saw were, but we got a lot of creepy imagery, and I'm sure like this weird face popped at one point, but we saw him in the woods and him on the defrost. So I'm assuming in the next episode Henry's going to be completely enlightened about all of the events that have happened in the past and what's going on, so next episode should be really good for giving us some answers. Alan returns home and sees Nick is sat outside the house, and he tells him that he's got the car for him, and he wants to know what he wants it for, and he decides he wants to make a monument for Lacey out of it. Now, I'm not sure why he would want that, because he locked him away. He's like idolises Lacey, but at the same time he says to Alan that, why did you lock him in that trunk? So obviously if their purposes were the same, then why does he hate what Alan's done and he idolises Lacey? So I think he's a bit conflicted about what's going on, unless Alan's motives were completely different to what Lacey's were. Alan looks down and sees that Nick's hand is covered in blood, and obviously he's a bit worried about Ruth, so he goes into the house and the place is just smashed up. There's glass everywhere, so we don't know what happened to Ruth or Wendell. We can assume at least one of them is probably alive. I don't think they would have left it on a cliffhanger if they were both dead. They would have showed the bodies for obviously dramatic effect. So that's how the episode ended. It was a bit of a mindfuck, a lot to get a head around. I probably should have taken a lot more time to think about the episode before I started filming this, and it's also like early in the morning. I get up early as I can to watch these episodes to get the videos out as fast as possible, so I'm tired, and when it's a mindfuck, it's a lot to take in. So here are some of the theories about what's going on I have from this episode, which there's definitely a lot. One big theory here is that with the Divas losing their child, maybe they couldn't cope, and with Matthew being out in the woods focusing on this voice of God and this schism and talking with the science guy, maybe there's a possibility they found a way to get to another time where the child survived, being the kid, Nick, and possibly they brought him back and realised something was wrong and they couldn't keep him, so they decided to keep him locked away, because obviously they didn't want people finding out what they've done. This also brings up for another theory about where Henry was for 11 days. Perhaps the Divas gave Henry away as some sacrifice or a trade for this other universe, world or time. Maybe they had to give him to receive the boy. So when they realised things were fucked up and they tried to hide the boy away, maybe Henry came back 11 days later, which would be a reason for why he didn't freeze to death, because he wasn't actually there in the snow. He could have been in a different alternate reality. And the third and final theory, there's definitely more, but these are the ones I can think of right off the top of my head, is about how the dementia has affected Ruth. Possibly it's not an effect of the dementia at all. It's actually something to do with like the time bleed between the boy being alive. If you've read The Dark Tower Wastelands, this is a spoiler for the Wastelands, but in the first book, Roland has a companion called Jake, and he dies. They mess around with the time and he comes back to life, and that completely splits up the main character's mind, because his whole reality is based on this person dying, but when they've come back to life, it doesn't mix with his reality, so their heads are completely fucked. And I think this is probably what's happened with Ruth. If they have taken the boy from another reality and he's still alive in this one, it's completely messed with her idea of reality, and that's what's caused this time slippage in her mind. There's a lot to chew on in this, and there's definitely a lot more, so I'm assuming you guys have a lot more theories for me to talk about, so if you leave them down in the comment section, then I'll happily talk about them either in the next video, or possibly I'll do a theory video if you want me to. But make sure you tell me in the comments if you want me to do that, and if I get enough I will do it. Overall, I did love the episode. It was very confusing, don't get me wrong, but I thought this is definitely a build up to a great like story driven episode next week. So thank you all for watching. Let me know your thoughts on it down below. Just, yeah, like I said, let me know your theories, let me know what you think about my theories, and I guess I will see you with episode 7 next week, which I have heard is like the constant from Lost, which is one of the greatest episodes in TV of all time. So we're in for another mindfuck, so stay tuned for next week's video, and I'll see you guys next time.